Welcome to episode 21 of Forest Focus. I'm your host, Paul Wade, with the Regional Public Affairs and Communications Office. We learned in episode 19 about ecosystem services or nature's benefits in an introduction type show. Today, we dive back in with part 2 of that series with our first forest benefit spotlight shining on water. Its importance needs no introduction, and here in California, its impact, be its presence or absence, is greatly felt by the millions of residents and beyond. We're joined on the phone again by Sherry Reckler, an Ecosystem Services Program Manager, and her special guest, Henry McCann, who is a research associate with the Public Policy Institute of California Water Policy Center. Welcome to you both. Let's talk water. So what type of work do you do, Henry, as it relates to water?
The Water Policy Center engages on an array of water management issues in California, including sustainable groundwater management, freshwater ecosystem stewardship, resilient urban water systems, and forest health. I lead the center's work on wildfire and forest management issues. The topic has grown into a top priority for policymakers in California, and we've been working to provide expert knowledge to decision makers that help them make informed decisions about reducing wildfire risk and improving forest health. Being a water policy center, we bring a unique water management perspective to these issues.
Well, how do you see water's connection to our national forests?
Over half of the state's surface water supplies, which are a really critical part of the state's water system, originate in the mountainous areas of California. In places like the Sierra Nevada range, runoff from rain and snowmelt flows through national forests, either on the surface as streams and rivers or as groundwater. And eventually they feed into the state's major water storage facilities, and then into the Central Valley, and ultimately into the ocean. So there's a real crest to coast connection there. The quantity and quality of surface water supplies in the state are therefore integrally tied to management actions on national forests. At a broad scale, wildfire risk is a major concern for surface water quality and quantity. Heavy rains following major wildfires can rapidly wash sediment and debris into streams, damaging water management infrastructure and degrading freshwater habitats. The other area of connection is the potential to augment water supplies through ecological thinning. The science is still in a development phase, but generally speaking, thinning forests to reduce wildfire risk may also increase the amount of water that can infiltrate into the ground or flow into streams. There are still outstanding questions about how much, when, and where this dynamic plays out, but the research is rapidly evolving.
Can you provide the listeners a sense of how water from a forest makes its way to benefit our daily lives?
Water is a key part of ensuring a healthy economy, environment, and society. And a huge part of this water comes from watersheds where national forests are a substantial presence. About half of the water used in California is used for the environment, including streams and rivers that are protected to enhance aquatic and terrestrial ecosystems. These waters are important not just for fish and critters, they also support recreation and tourism, which are important for many rural economies. For example, a significant amount of environmental water flows through the Klamath and Six Rivers National Forests up on the North Coast. California is an agricultural powerhouse responsible for sending high-quality food to feed the state, the nation, and the world. Economic return on water used for agriculture has been increasing over time as crop yields rise and with shifts to high-revenue perennial crops. While only 2% of the state's GDP, this sector is the centerpiece of several regional economies, including the Central Valley. The Sacramento River system is a key source of water for agriculture and cities. The water that flows into this river comes from several national forests in our northern Sierra Nevada range. A portion of this water is pumped out of the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta and transported through aqueducts to farms in the San Joaquin Valley and cities in Southern California. This is a truly remarkable feat of engineering. Water falls in the northern part of our state, and demand for water is highest in the southern part of our state, and our infrastructure helps us bring water from point A to point B. Water from national forests flows to urban water systems throughout the state, which in turn provide water to our homes, offices, businesses, and industries. This water is the bedrock of public health and sanitation systems that keep us healthy and safe. This water is instrumental to economic growth and development in our state.
All right, Henry. So in the news, we always hear stuff like a drought, and we're not going to get enough water, and there's all types of things that focus around sort of the scarcity of water. So what is impacting water quantity here in California?
California's variable climate is marked by large swings in seasonal and annual precipitation, severe multi-year droughts, and occasional intense flooding. In other words, there's no typical water year in California. As such, the state's water management systems, including the infrastructure that we previously talked about and the laws that govern water use, were designed to cope with this variability. For example, we built very large dams and reservoirs to capture enough precipitation and snowmelt to meet several years' worth of demand, which can come in handy in a dry year. Even with those systems in place, our climate is becoming warmer and more variable, with significant changes ahead. This includes rising temperatures, shrinking snowpacks, and more volatile precipitation, all of which affect water quantity. The last multi-year drought, from 2012 to 2016, which was exceptionally dry and hot, taught us that our system is vulnerable to this degree of water scarcity, with consequences for agriculture, rural communities, and freshwater ecosystems.
How do wildfires affect how water is received by national forests?
The effects of wildfire on watersheds is complex and multifaceted. The scientific community is spending considerable energy right now on determining these relationships using advanced measurement technologies. Key considerations in this dynamic include the severity and extent of the wildfire, precipitation patterns following wildfires, and how vegetation grows back over time. Generally speaking, we know that large, high-severity wildfires that destroy a significant amount of vegetation on the land can increase the speed of runoff and bring sediment, rocks, and dead trees along with it. As mentioned before, this can cause major damage to water management infrastructure. And as a reminder, this infrastructure serves multiple purposes, including hydropower production, ecosystem management, flood control, water supply, and recreational opportunities. The King Fire of 2014 is a prime example. This fire burned on the El Dorado National Forest in the Sierra Nevada range and caused several $1 million of damage to the American River watershed. There are other examples of wildfires that burn in national forests having negative consequences for water managers, including in Colorado's Front Range and in New Mexico's Rio Grande watershed.
Okay, residents of California are aware of previous drought years and how this has negative results on many things, mainly wildfire risk. But what about how it affects, for instance, tree mortality that some of our listeners might have heard about?
Well, Paul, we're currently experiencing very dry conditions in our state, and it's our second consecutive dry year. We also know that the snowpack is below average and that drought alarm bells are ringing across the state. Now, from a water perspective, the state appears to be addressing drought conditions on a regional basis. There's a parallel conversation happening right now about wildfire risk. I think a bulk of that conversation has been focused on the near-term risks, including what the threats are to homes and to communities this spring and this summer, especially in light of last year's devastating wildfire season. I think there's been less of a focus on tree mortality in the conversation. However, following the 2012 to 16 drought, there were some interesting sort of takeaways for tree mortality and wildfire from the academic community. So one I'd like to highlight is the work of Roger Bales and others who really sort of highlighted the fact that tree mortality was linked to multi-year drought conditions. So without adequate water, trees get stressed and can die by drying out or by weakened defenses against bark beetles and other bugs. This should be a real concern right now especially if California's drought continues through next winter and we end up in another multi-year drought. The other key insight is from work by Scott Stevens and others who are working on understanding the relationship between tree mortality, especially in the conifer forests of our state, and wildfire. They argue that the tree mortality epidemic that we experienced during the drought and in the wake of the drought increased the potential for mass fire, which are very large, hot burning fires. And the Creek Fire of last year may serve as an example of where tree mortality was intersecting with wildfire behavior. The 380,000 acre Creek Fire, which burned mostly on the Sierra National Forest, burned in an area with a huge amount of tree mortality. Dead trees likely influenced the severity of this devastating wildfire. This is definitely something that should be on the minds of not only the fire suppression community, but also local, state, and federal forest managers and the public at large.
So, Henry, I've got a question for you. How do you think the California State Administration's efforts on climate change might impact what's going on with California's water?
The Newsom administration is paying close attention to the importance of climate change mitigation and adaptation actions, especially with respect to water. In 2020, Governor Newsom released a final version of the water resilience portfolio, which is really a blueprint for making California more resilient to extreme droughts and floods, rising temperatures, and declining ecosystem health, especially freshwater ecosystem health. It also includes a focus on groundwater management, which has been a key issue in the state since the passage of the 2014 Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. One of the key questions is how the actions that are defined in the water resilience portfolio will be carried out on the ground. From my perspective, it appears that the Newsom administration is working to integrate water, land, and air issues in a more holistic approach to making the state more resilient and better adapted to a changing climate.
We know dams exist in various sizes on Forest Service lands, with some being removed to assist fish habitat. Since you brought it up earlier, can you tell us basically the good and the bad about dams and how it relates to water?
California has nearly 1,500 dams. Most of these dams are very small and operated by local agencies and private companies. 240 large dam reservoir systems, which are owned primarily by state and federal agencies, account for about 60% of the state's surface water storage capacity. Dams are operated to meet multiple objectives, including buffering water supplies against drought conditions to meet the needs of cities and farms, but also electricity supply, flood management, and freshwater ecosystem management. The fact is that these multiple objectives can sometimes come into conflict. For example, to manage floods, operators need to release enough water to create space during the wintertime, which increases the chances that reservoirs may not be full in spring when water demands increase. Another thing, Paul, is that national forests occupy a significant portion of lands above our major surface water reservoirs. This is especially true in the Sierra Nevada region. This is really important because the health of forests on national forest lands bears on how well these reservoirs are able to meet water demands and manage for multiple benefits. There are several reasons to remove dams, including high environmental costs, especially when aquatic ecosystems can be improved, earthquake safety hazard, and reduced benefits. For example, when reservoirs are filled with sediments and are no longer useful.
All right, Henry, this is a bit of a kind of a crystal ball kind of thing here. In the upcoming years, what can we sort of expect, or some of your certainly positive outlooks in terms of water flow and availability?
Paul, that's a great question. I think the key to the future is actually looking to our recent past. The 2012-2016 drought, which was the hottest and one of the driest in state history, offered a window into the future of what a warming climate looks like in California with respect to water management. And I think we pulled away a couple of key lessons from that drought, which will help make the state's water system more resilient to a changing climate in the future. So the first is planning ahead. So stronger drought planning is really critical to urban water management, groundwater sustainability, and safe drinking water in rural communities, not to mention freshwater ecosystems. These were areas that were hard hit for the most part in the last drought, and in part due to lack of planning. So the more we can do on anticipating how climate change is going to impact these areas, the better. The second is upgrading the water grid. So this is the infrastructure that California uses to collect and convey water from where it lands on our state to where it's used. This includes repairing facilities that are broken, expanding conveyance and storage capacity, and making sure that we're integrating our surface and groundwater operations. The third is updating water allocation rules. So California should closely consider comprehensively updating the way that it allocates its water. So this is in order to find equitable and efficient ways to allocate limited supplies during dry times, while promoting efforts to capture and store water during wet times. The fourth piece is find the money. In other words, reliable funding is crucial for adapting to climate change, and new sources of funding are needed to pay for the water management investments that are needed to be made and to filling funding gaps in the state's water system.
Okay, so the next question is going to be something that talks about, yes, you just offered us the big picture, but it does take a village. It does take every single one of us to be part of that plan. So what can the public do? What is their call to action to help sustain this critical, life-giving benefit for future generations?
Here's what I would suggest, Paul. I would suggest that you go out and learn about the state's water landscape and the role that forests play in maintaining key benefits to the economy, environment, and society. And this might include learning about how the water that you use in your home, or to water your vegetable garden, or to run your business, gets to you, gets to the point where you can actually use it in your life. This includes thinking about where water comes from and what your water provider is doing to ensure the reliability of that water source over time. Finally, Paul, I'd say go out and see it for yourself. Head out to a national forest and see where water comes from, and make that connection between crest and coast.
So I really want to thank Henry today for his presentation. It was certainly a great opportunity to delve into the nature's benefits of water. And Paul, I think the next one that we're going to be treating will be recreation.
Well, there you have it. Thanks to Henry McCann for quenching our thirst for knowledge and enlightening us on our first nature's benefit, water. And thank you to Sherry Reckler for unveiling the next benefit, recreation, in part 3 of our series on how national forests benefit your daily lives. For more information on water, check out the links on the show's description page that will take you to an engaging infographic. And to help the younger generation, there's also an animated video. Thank you for listening. To learn more about this show, share it, or hear our other episodes, please search Forest Focus Podcast. And if you have questions or suggestions on a topic of area of expertise you would like us to feature, please email us at sm.fs.r5ffpodcast@usda.gov. Until next time, enjoy your public lands. And remember to recreate responsibly. Know before you go, and learn what you can do to prevent wildfires. Take care. This podcast is sponsored by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Forest Service, and USDA is an equal opportunity provider, employer, and lender.